I don't mean, some people think of it as sexual slave, but it's not like that, innit? Obviously, man needs his needs, innit?
Okay, free rent, and what would that be like in exchange for?
Just what, for sex?
He says he can't speak now, but it's free rent in exchange for pussy licking once a week. What would happen if sort of that wasn't to happen? Would I be allowed to stay in the property still, or not?
Yeah, it's important you don't fall behind.
Women ultimately are finding themselves in vulnerable positions, which is akin to modern slavery, by way of sex for rent, having to seek out accommodation on the basis they are ultimately selling their bodies and being exploited in this way because of poverty.
No woman would want to put herself or her family through such an ordeal, which in some way is a rape, because you don't want to. You don't want to have to give yourself physically to put a roof over your head.
Picture the scene. You've been looking for somewhere to live for ages, and you finally find somewhere that fits the bill, and you're excited. And then you find it comes with a shocking catch.
Sex for rent is an arrangement where landlords exchange accommodation for free or at a discounted rate in return for sexual relations with their tenants, and it often involves the exploitation of vulnerable people.
After first being exposed in a 2018 documentary, the government made it clear that these arrangements were made illegal in the UK under the Sexual Offences Act. But only one person has actually been convicted since then. And as the cost of living rages on, we wanted to see if sex for rent is still prevalent and just how common it really is.
Through our own research, we found that there was surprisingly a large volume of rooms advertised for open-minded younger females, or ads that stipulated that free rent was negotiable.
We decided to go undercover and reach out to these landlords to see if the ads were legitimate and what those posting them really had in mind.
So today we're going undercover and looking through various platforms such as Craigslist, Gumtree, and we're going to respond to any adverts that look or seem suspicious.
We're looking all over the UK, and we can already see that there are dozens of adverts of this kind that look quite suspicious.
A large number of these adverts are for London, but they do extend all over the UK, including in the north of England, Northern Ireland and Wales.
We've been replying to a number of them today to see how rife these types of propositions are, despite it being made illegal.
We received numerous replies from seemingly predatory landlords who have been offering free rooms.
One has even offered a room straight away. He's saying he has a Sybian, the most popular toy in porn, to be used whenever the prospective tenant wants.
We're going to set up calls using our aliases, and we're going to be speaking to these landlords throughout the week.
Hey, how are you? It's Millie here.
Hi, it's me, Millie, calling.
Can you tell me a little bit about the room and what you're looking for?
Yeah, it's a one-bedroom flat, central Brighton. It's just off Edward Street. And obviously, as I said, it was on Craigslist, and obviously, when I put the numbers back, put the ad in, it's obviously just to stay, and then obviously have, how to put it, have sex like probably once a day.
Well, I guess the sort of arrangement I'm looking for is, one night a week. It wouldn't be the whole night. One occasion, but hopefully, enjoyable enough for both of us.
Okay, got you. So that's like once a week, having sex. Is that right?
That's right.
I prefer to have a relationship, to be honest, because it just makes more sense. I'm living with a woman, have a relationship with her.
He says he can't speak now, but it's free rent in exchange for pussy licking once a week.
If you get along, maybe a relationship, I don't know, would that be possible for you?
What would that entail?
I would like to, a girl doesn't find attractive like you, just of course, if you like me in return, like, that would be a bonus. Like, that would have to be something that would actually, that would have to actually be a thing.
So overall, we have now been offered 9 rooms from just the landlords we initially reached out to within 24 hours.
One of the landlords said he wanted to meet in person to discuss the arrangement.
We've set up a meeting in a local cafe and are going undercover to film the conversation.
I'm Millie. Yeah, I was just wondering, is the room still available and what you're kind of looking for?
You know what it is, innit?
Huh?
You know what I'm looking for, innit?
I know. I think I mean,
if I wanted to, it could. But the problem is I don't have time. If I created a profile, if I download the app, I know I can get in, but I just don't have the time for it.
so you wanting someone to move in with you, right?
Yeah. Because obviously I'm a man, innit? A man needs a female company.
Have you done this before?
I've done it before, but then people get jealous and they start flagging up because they don't like my location, innit? They think I'll get everything because of my location. But anyway, I don't really care anyway. Just.
And how? Sorry, I'm just quite nervous. I've never
had
done
no
this
one
before.
stay in my house for maybe about 5.5 years now.
And was that also the person you had before? Was that through Craigslist?
Yeah, I had loads of good people here, nice girls.
Yeah, and they just come and stay with you, share with you?
Mainly I had more Eastern European in it. Could be no strings attached or either way. I don't know, man. I don't know what I want anyway. I'm just a bad boy. I don't mean it. Some people think that it's a sexual slave, but it's not like that, innit? Obviously, man needs his needs, innit?
Yeah.
I don't know about... Yeah. I don't know, if you like me and if you like each other, there's a chemistry and bang, yeah. Because I'm not gonna lie, certain few girls, I did have a bit of, I feel like I'm pressurizing them, so I don't like that. If someone likes me, then yeah, but if not, they will. I don't like that. I don't like forcing. I don't force no one.
If I wanted to stay long term and we didn't have that connection and we weren't having sex, would that be an issue?
Of course it would be an issue. I'm a man. I need my needs in it.
Okay.
You know?
And when you say needs, what do you mean by that?
Sexual needs in it, man, you know?
And how often would you expect that?
What's that? Just nighttime before sleep. Then you sleep like a baby. Yeah, sorry, I didn't ask you, what do you do? Work?
I work in social media, so I do freelance stuff.
Oh, freelance?
Yeah, exactly.
Hope you're not
Is that all right?
report me what I'm doing. Yeah?
No.
So we've just gotten back from meeting one of the landlords. We went undercover to find out a bit more about the arrangement that he originally advertised on Craigslist. Pete, what was it like when you spoke to him?
It was pretty shocking. I think that the fact that these sort of arrangements are out there and that during the cost of living, when people are particularly vulnerable, those are the sort of opportunities that people have when they're struggling with their rent or struggling to find a place to live. It just seemed like it could open the door to quite dangerous situations and the whole thing seemed quite predatory, to be honest. In April 2023, the Home Office issued a call for evidence to understand the scale of sex for rent exchanges in the UK.
We submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Home Office to find out the volume of people who came forward in their call for evidence.
We requested generic information such as the gender and age of those affected so we could find out who's been targeted the most. We also inquired if victims felt supported or not.
The Home Office rejected our request for this information on the grounds that it wasn't in the public interest.
And considering to our knowledge that only one person has been arrested.
And he was exposed through journalism.
We think it is massively within the public interest to find out whether this is happening and whether victims have been failed. A spokesperson said, exploitative so-called sex for rent arrangements are a horrendous abuse of power which puts people, especially young women, in desperate situations. It is vital that we listen to victims and consider whether new measures are needed to protect them.
The information requested has been withheld while we consider the findings from a call for evidence on the issue and any actions to further address sex for rent. Sex for rent is already illegal under the Sexual Offences Act, and landlords can be prosecuted for attempting to engage in sex for rent.
Some charities warn that rising costs paired with years of underfunding mean women, including those with trauma and mental health issues, are having to turn to sex in exchange for housing or to meet other basic needs.
Renters are facing record prices, with rents growing at the fastest annual rate for more than a decade. This year, the average private rent in England rose to a shocking £200 a week, or £868 a month.
Even though leasing out a room in return for sex acts is widely seen as predatory behaviour, including by the Home Office.
Some have also argued that if it involves two consenting adults, why is it such a big issue?
Well, because it can have seriously negative effects on victims, and these landlords tend to prey on those who are vulnerable. A large number of these victims are refugees, people on low income, or existing tenants who are pushed into the arrangement because they can no longer pay their rent.
One victim, who chose to remain anonymous, became engaged in a sex-for-rent arrangement with her landlord after she was already an existing tenant. She opened up about the impact it continues to have on her.
The effect on me has been crippling. It's absolutely had a massive impact on my physical and mental well-being. I am embarrassed to admit that I've had suicidal thoughts. The fact that somebody has such a hold on you, it's... I'm not sure if it's the right term. It's like a ongoing torture where your well-being, your home is supposed to be your safe place. And when somebody's trying to rip something from you that is so personal, do you understand, physically, your physical well-being, and that there is such an expectation of you having to give yourself, your body, to put a roof over your head and to feel safe, but ultimately you don't feel safe. So it has such a crippling effect.
We also spoke to Tilly Smith, Campaigns and Partnerships Officer at Generation Rent. They offer support to victims and have been raising awareness for the issue. Could you just tell me a little bit about why you're working with victims of sex for rent and why it's an issue that your organisation is kind of focusing on?
The stories that people tell us are that these are really very exploitative, coercive, and sometimes quite dangerous situations that people are being coerced into. Very often the alternative for people, choice, if you can even call it that, is homelessness or eviction, and then the fear of homelessness. There does seem to be a number of these sorts of arrangements established from the outset. There is also the issue we found from our research where people will sort of be they will set up what they believe, what they consider to be a legitimate tenancy with who they consider to be a legitimate landlord or letting agent, and then they will have sort of an issue with paying the rent on occasion, and then that is the point when the landlord or letting agent propositions them, and that is particularly concerning considering we are in the midst of a cost of living crisis. Rents are at an all-time high. They continue to be increasing, and people are really struggling. So that the sort of latter of those two arrangements, there is a real danger that people are going to be put in situations where that's going to be happening more often, given the economic situation.
Research from the charity Generation Rent found that during their lifetime, more than 200,000 female private renters could be offered discounted fees by landlords in exchange for sexual acts.
But despite the surprising volume of these landlords, the only person to be prosecuted so far is Christopher Cox, a 53-year-old man who was given a 12-month prison sentence in May 2022.
The landlord from Cranley in Surrey posted adverts on Craigslist looking for a girl in need. He pleaded guilty to a charge of controlling prostitution for gain and 2 charges of inciting prostitution for gain.
We spoke to Dr. Charlotte Proudman, a solicitor and expert in sex for rent. She said many of these cases are akin to modern slavery.
So the current law at the moment doesn't actually make clear, i.e. there's no specific criminal offence for sex for rent. So instead, the law is fairly fragmented, and outdated laws, you might say, are used in situations where there are allegations of sex for rent. One example being the Sexual Offences Act 2003, which can be used potentially to prosecute perpetrators, defendants, for sex for rent, but only if the victim defines themselves as a prostitute. And so that's one of the key barriers, in my view, to prosecuting under the Sexual Offences Act, because of course most women who are victims of sex for rent don't see themselves as prostitutes, and we know that the law isn't working because there's only been 1 conviction for sex for rent, despite the fact it's thought that 200,000 women have been affected by this. I think one of the biggest things is that women ultimately are finding themselves in vulnerable positions, which is akin to modern slavery, by way of sex for rent, having to seek out accommodation on the basis they are ultimately selling their bodies and being exploited in this way because of poverty. And the government ultimately needs to address that and look at universal credit, whether it's fit for purpose, look at the no recourse to public funds for migrant women and whether that should be changed. Of course it should. Migrant women should have the same access to public services and public funding just like anybody else. They're not second-class citizens. So look at the most vulnerable in our society and making sure there is a safety net in place. And when it comes to perpetrators, there should be a zero tolerance approach. So if they are reported to the police, then the police need to take action. You know, they need to prosecute when there is evidence available and those victims are willing to come forward and provide a witness statement, and they need to take a robust approach against violence against women and girls.
So what can renters do to protect themselves? Our investigation showed that some of the other key indicators to look out for are adverts that mention rent for cleaning or helping around the house.
As only one person has been prosecuted under sex for rent, people have accused the government of not doing enough to combat the prevailing issue.
Although the Home Office announced this year that a new law is being considered to crack down on sex for rent and see if existing legislation does enough to protect victims.
But will this be enough to combat the issue?